All right. Yeah. So let's welcome back. Yeah, and let's continue to the second part of the workshop. So, how does it feel after the lecture? A bit intense. Yeah. I'm sorry I flooded you with so much information and everything. How does it feel? Any questions? Anything unclear maybe or?
It's awesome because I personally heard a lot of new information. It was very well structured and very good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions maybe? Does it all make sense? Yeah, everything was clear. So, like, not too much like terminology or like academic jargon and buzzwords and so on. So like it was
no,
to the point.
Everything is okay, but
Okay.
I think there will some questions that will arise later.
All right. But right now, like, yeah, please.
How the notion of fake news correlates with the post-truth era and
Yeah, that's
elaborate on this.
a good question, which actually leads me. It's so good that you reminded me because I have brought a bunch of books with me. So I would like to show you just what's being done on this in the West right now, because people are trying to work on this. So this book is unfortunately in Swedish. Can anybody read Swedish here? No. You can.
Okay.
Ah, okay. So it's called Alternativa Fakta. That's difficult, right? Yeah. Well, Swedish at its easiest, probably. The alternative facts. It's written on kunskapen och dess fiender, about knowledge and its enemies. Written by Åsa Wikfors, who is a Swedish philosopher. He works at the University of Stockholm, and she's really one of the leading experts in like philosophy of knowledge. And she has just written this book. I think it's being translated into English, so it will be available quite soon. And I think it's quite a good attempt at summarizing some and trying to analyze some of the key points on this. And it actually deals with alternative facts and post-truth very much. Not so much about fake news in this book, but actually, like, there's a chapter of disinformation. So she's trying to look at this more conventional, more traditional idea of disinformation. But I think it's still quite relevant. So, trying to answer your question more directly, of course, these are related. But post-truth, I think, is a more general thing. It's kind of, perhaps, this is what would be used to describe the entire landscape where fake news is thriving. So it's more of a condition, like a general, maybe intellectual condition, where we, again, the boundaries between the right and wrong, the true and false, have been eroded, yeah, and blurred, and things are kind of really, really unclear and messy. And actually, like, unfortunately, postmodern, post-structuralist philosophy has done its share to lead to this state of affairs. I'm not blaming them squarely, but it's kind of, I think it's kind of enmeshed in so post-truth is probably a more general description of a situation where we are all aware of the relativity of truth, of subjectivity of truth, and basically anybody can, based on this, anybody can lay claim to their own truth, So it's kind of this fragmentation of the common intersubjective truth into these multiple subjective truths, which are thought to be kind of almost equivalent, so as good, and anybody's version is as good as anybody's else. So that's it. Yeah, I can just you can pass it by. I mean, it's in Swedish, but yeah, just have a look at it. Another, this one is in English. It's called Fake News, Falsehood, Fabrication, and Fantasy in Journalism by Brian McNair. Well, it's really thin. The fact that I don't really like about this book is that it is so thin. Well, it is quite comfortable to read quickly. And he's just trying to approach fake news like very generally, but he also, I think, he makes quite a lot of mistakes. So he does not trace the history of fake news so well, you know, as well as I did. And he's a bit like he lacks some definite conclusions about this, but it's still quite interesting. So yeah, have a look. And another one is it's very new, very fresh. I just got it 2 days before I left for leave. It's called Fortress Russia: Conspiracy Theories in Post-Soviet Russia, written by Ilya Yablokov, actually a Russian researcher who lives in the UK and works in the UK. He's quite kind of pro-Western, I think, at least as pro-Western and liberal as Russians get. And he's kind of, I think he's in some ways he's quite pro-Ukrainian actually. So I think it's a good book, and especially it's a good source for Westerners. Because I mean, it's written by a Russian, so you cannot really blame him or like Ukrainian nationalism or any kind of bias or something. So it's a good source. So yeah, have a look as well. Yes, sure. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Maybe it's a stupid question,
Yeah.
but there are any circumstances in journalist's life, practical life, when he or she must use fake with good intention, only good intentions?
Mm-hmm. Actually, I would say there are no stupid questions, not in academia actually. And some of the greatest ideas, they actually come from very simple, very seemingly obvious and seemingly stupid questions. So, and that's a really good one. My first reaction would be to say no. There is no justification for using fake in journalist work, unless we talk about satire. But even that, I think that actually those satirical TV shows and satirical fake news websites, they have also contributed to the erosion of this classical journalism. So in that sense, they kind of made things worse. So my first impulse is to say no, but I would definitely need to think more about it. That's a very good question, actually. It's kind of, it provokes to think about this. So, thank you. But what do you guys think? Is it?
In this case, I agree with you, but I think maybe there are another version of answer and so on.
Probably,
I
yeah.
just want to open this for me.
Yeah. Well, that's a great opening for a potential discussion. Definitely. Thanks. Okay. Anything else? All right. So if you guys have any questions later on, so just shoot away. All right. Let's move to the practical part now. In this part, I want you to do something that you don't typically do, but well, I hope so. Maybe I'm wrong. But I want you to write a fake news story. So you will work in groups. I think would be like we can have maybe groups of 4. So this would be a group of 4. This would be a group of 4, and this would be a group of 5. Right? Yeah, makes sense. Okay, is that clear? Yeah. So a group of 4, a group of 4, and a group of 5. Right? Excellent. So 3 groups. top pen, as you would say. The task is just take a piece of paper. I mean, feel free to use these printouts and scribble on the back side. No specific word limit, but I mean it should be a text, a viable text, so certainly longer than a couple of sentences. And there are a couple of rules around this. So the first one is try to use in your fake news story a concept which packs an entire history or invokes a longer chain of associations, right, in a compact way. So try to look for those concepts that kind of have this long tail of other associations and that bring other stories, that call up other compelling stories. And try also to invoke or incorporate some deep stories, yeah? So try to think about history, culture, psychology, some deeply psychological things that can basically entice a strong emotional reaction, right, in people. So think about those things. So this is the first thing. Then try to add some group identification as well. So like us versus them thing. Or something that works to strengthen a group identity of a certain group. Or maybe undermine another group's identity. That's also possible, right? Quite interesting. And try to make it exciting. Try to make it really, really interesting, unusual, absurd, so something that is really pleasurable actually to read, that is fun to read, and easy to do. One story, yes, per group, yeah. So let's say 30 minutes, 40 minutes?
30 and then we'll see.
Okay, let's start with 30 minutes and we'll see how that goes. All right? Time is running. Well, and it can be in Ukrainian, but if you can do English, do that. Yeah. So I will accept like any language here, but I mean try to practice English a little bit. But if you feel like it would be very difficult, like prohibitively difficult, then I'll accept a text in Ukrainian. You guys have no option, right? So,
Yes.
Which is great, yeah. Do the English text.
Yes.
Давайте думаємо, які може продукції міф нашу фотографію може використати, щоб Дивіться, це що я маю на увазі deep story. Це ж українці близьке. Значить,
So the goal is to make sure that like, most of the people believe that this is true.
Yeah. It must be kind of believable. So no kind of, I don't know, like flying elephants or... But I mean like, aliens could be believable.
We talked about right-wing LGBT and church parade, but it's almost like flying.
I don't know, like it's, you know, that's a fine line. So, I mean, everything is believable for somebody, you know, so there will always be people who believe it.
Всі, хто йде на вибори,
Concept as a concept history.
They shift their ideology, like, yeah, opinion, they became radical. Like, we have some radical guys in our country that are against.
Everything's fine?
Yeah.
So the police punished them.
Ми можемо розказати історію навколо підлітка, який
Against the trend.
коли там, не знаю, це історія. Концепт as a concept history.
Left? Bunch of foundations.
Але давайте, яка подія? Вона буде цікаво і смішно. Group identification конкретної особи. І тут концепт закону
Добре, то що ми робимо?
Injury.
На екіпажі. Розбили всі яйця.
Затушили всі.
Легоці? Оце не так сказала. Не дотерпіла.
Maybe police.
Сімейний фестиваль. Давай писати трохи українською. Були зелені, вони були зелені. Що? Сховати в цей.
Вони гарно, вони вважають,
Смислі в 21-му, або вони можуть вийти з транспорту. Що ти кричати? Ніч із мене. Типа, перекидати ногами. Янг, Луки,
А що там буде робити пацан, який?
Короче, люди з різнокольоровими, молоді люди з різнокольоровими волоссям. Тому що це ти ж маєш розподіляти, тобто є люди з традиційними звичаями, є і інші люди з різнокольоровими. Їх було 50 штук.
Така пунктами пишу, я
The difference between gay parade and
Що? Прийшли, чого?
it's a kind of play of words.
Прийшли туди, як звичайно.
For example,
Дізгайз. І що? Так ні.
right?
Ні, так вони.
They would write gay
Друзі,
parade.
всіх пускають, всі святкуються, всі діляться, все хорошо, все мило. Вони прийшли, як звичайно, звичайно, дебілі. Купили там прохід за 10 гривень.
сільську купили.
Сметану.
It should be professional or it should be
Що це? Це таємна ініціація органу? Що це таке?
Або викидати в своїм сусідстві.
Ви определіться на чиї листові. Чи я не забув? Що ви тут написали? Так, звичайно, робили, вирішили.
квиток? Це означає
Не купили, просто прийшли як всі. Прийшли як всі. Так, там всі відкриті, всі люди добрі, всі люди українці, щирі.
the participants
Прийшли, як
gay
звичайно.
were injured.
дістали телефон.
Ну так, почали. Ім'я
Yeah.
І телевізор.
Дай. З собою принесли. Приховують.
Okay.
класно.
І мегафон.
Да.
Почали
Okay, we have to show. Let's go for there.
Я посмію.
We have to repeat the title
перекидати, тушити
for
мангал,
more information.
поправити.
Yes, but we have to keep the same information.
Конфлікт ставлять свій рот, ставлять сосісками.
Їх попросили, сказали, сорі, вас хорош. Чой? Так, вони ж друзями прийшли.
Почали купляти сосиски веганів.
Веган, хуліган.
Скажи, що це було топ веганів.
Ні, вони не класні.
У нас просрочена
Омбембон це веганом казали в Києві. Три заклади. Це франшиза. Між іншим, айдентика вегану хулігану, як франшиза, це маска. З рогами. Така от, як знаю на вебі Фейсбуці, це маска вегану хулігану. Так що можемо сказати, що вони були врагати Це так, це за... Да. І серед відвідувачів знайшлись ті люди,
Це ж все це хлопчик, який все життя хотів. Це він хотів
він тоді не пробував. То типу, то скоріше цей хлопчик, він був одним з тих, хто мали лото.
Його батьки силою потім.
Потягнули туди, він стояв, розгортав сосиски світався. Підпрацьовував на літній роботі. Тому 15-16.
Він хоче навіть прийняти.
Він хоче їсти, а батьки вранці живуть. Вони притягнули його.
Це я вважаю, що є оце таке отож, ось цим запахом.
Все,
О, все, почалась схема, понятно.
Тільки Софії поділ.
Так.
Да, він буде готовий свої сосиски і...
Так, і до них підійшли прості дідочі виступні. Прості дідочі сказали, що чоловіки, але це... Вони Вони підійшла адміністрація. Організатор фестивалю курс, дисципліни, кожен прийти. Прям лисоватий, з закрученими вусами.
Типа сказали, що так, у нас таке м'ясо, м'ясо. А ми важно, що з ним стають. Ось типу тут просто всі літають. Ми прийшли, дістали свій палатку.
І вони сказали, окей, просто зніміть цей знак. Залишайтесь тут, але зніміть цей знак. А ті кажуть, ніфіга, це наш значить, ми хочемо, щоб всі люди жили, але що вони фінансують. Ладно,
конфлікт виник через плакат.
через плакат. Один з них хлопчик, якого різних став. Його звати Юліан. Тому що це типове ім'я дитини. Це відомо. Ні, це садицький відомо.
Давай
Дуже органічно звучить. Коротше. Юліан Тівтєнків.
курочки.
Стейков. Юліан Савов. Або холодець.
А ти бачиш, типа сало. Сало в шоколаді.
Ні, чекай. Ми переходимо з почерку.
Сам побачив
Ні.
своєму напису свого прізвища,
І він... Ні, чекай, у нас конфлікт не в тому. Ну, це ми можемо, так, його цитату. От слова очевидця, так, він каже, 15 років, не знаю, що це таке.
Сало в шоколаді, я потім стояв.
Коротше, конфлікт через плакат. Відмовились його знімати, тому організатори попросили їх покинути територію. Залежить від мене, ще буде м'ясо.
Ви можете статтю здати. Ставити. Щось ми собі
Так. На що вони відреагували дуже агресивно, почали розвалювати інші точки, тушити механи і основний поверх. Якраз пам'ятаємо про структуру, оця штука в нас має бути в шапці. Що вони відтворили?
Типу вегани
Основний меседж, так, сімейний підхід. Так.
Або там не знаю.
Реально правильно. Ці праздники майські і все, вихідні задержиш святкувати. Загашення нормально. Добре.
Може і побіжали.
Охорона не має права в'язати, охорона має право викликати поліцію. Приїхала поліція, зафіксувала трьох травмованих. Загальні збитки оцінюються 20 тисячами гривень. Все, кінець.
Ні, і тут коментар цього хлопчика.
Ні, я не про структуру, це кінець історії. Зафіксували трьох травмованих і сума збитків 25 тисяч гривень.
Типа значно я.
Розтовпили.
Ні, нормально, насправді.
Та ні, ну якщо це на фестиваль, що організований, простих людей. Там саме домашнє.
Візуалізація добре.
Тепер треба прописати коментар в чувачках. Юліан саме.
Може і що не дізналися?
Ну, коментар може. Давай коментар, що дай нам ручку.
При подачі показників, ну типу, коли ми взяли міліцію, один хлопець дізнався в домашньому допомогти, що він батьки, ну я просто коментар.
До речі, нам треба підв'язати один з учасників з боку цієї війни також зізнався, там будучи неповнолітнім, також зізнався в примусовому споживанні, в примусовій відмові.
І це теж можна дати заголовок, типу, як домашнє насильство, ну, типу, що
Domestic violence based заворушки. But you can fight. I need you. And I love you. Я прописую коментар, ви перекладайте і додаєте
домашнє насильство.
Ну, нам треба перед коментарем підказати, хто чим.
А ми починаємо з чого?
Щас.
Масове заворушення на стороні.
Загалом ми навіть документів не бачимо.
Ні, що, може, ну, в них медіа, ти бачила про FBI? Там три Щас, я в транслейтер заб'ю те, що я перекладаю. Ти перекладай те, що ми маємо. Ой, веди зелені свята. Значить,
Так, з датами
Це ж слід?
Maybe Polish
Citation цей фестиваль
Один із
Maybe just one chapter was nothing.
але зараз я це
The other is not joined the group of adults. And maybe we can three key policemen.
Traditional festival.
Maybe some of them ignored and yeah, they're enjoying
Yes, yes.
А хто там венційний взагалі?
They are here to protect you and if they're like situations.
Та я вже
It's for like
Чого
I
поставили?
think that
Ні, так я в транслейтер це.
Yeah, привет.
Ти грамер виправляє просто, але ти не знаєш, як поформувати.
8 липня день сім'ї.
Я вже скинув. Я пишу коментар геніально. Що, ми пишемо цю тему про прізвище?
Ну, так.
My parents were hiding the meaning of my surname.
Цього вівторка через
Ні, тоді, якщо про святкування, то краще. Ні, чекай. Ні, on behalf не канає. Можна просто типу season opening. Season opening festival.
Це ж не знаю.
Season opening festival.
дуже добре. Є сьогодні обладнання, всі зібрали.
Ну, але ти ставиш її, що on behalf of А наша тут, якщо в тебе зал, генічні.
Оце теж
Загалом, якщо ти ще звучать
Ой, там в цьому має десь виходить, типу, там розповідається про вічі,
Бачиш? Я їх організовую. Ми ще й паралельно мізогінічні там.
Индия,
Я тільки на два рази прошу. Де обрав, де ясно, адаптується під лексику, яку ти переважно використовуєш.
To demonstrate my human rights.
How to say it, like, not in the aggressive way, just like, just like, protest okay, but then in a kind way.
And support
Будемо казати, що хлопці. But yeah, my parents were considering me necessary for 15 years. You can imagine my astonishment when I saw a tent with my son on it.
Okay, guys.
No.
Okay, 10 minutes,
No,
right?
more.
10 more minutes.
More.
More?
More.
What are you doing? Okay, both
saying the real faces.
alright, it's no problem. So 15 more minutes.
Так що, ми пишемо про те, що він попробував?
Можеш її хотіти спробувати.
Ну, йому дали. Дамочки загибали.
Батьки були десь далеко, тому що
Вже мало почали зганяти, вони рішали свої позиції, відділився від батьків.
Але коли я зміг попробувати, вже почали заборони, вся фігня, потім поліція Я скажу просто, всі почали битись.
Поможіть мені вродити половину, будь ласка.
це вийшов такий певні
Yeah,
арнази.
because police went there to like with the knife or with the gun to,
But they are religious.
to keep it like it's believable.
Yeah, okay. Right.
Maybe it really was the only case in my wasn't a different person who I called wasn't clear, you know, like that.
Так то що це один абзац.
More believable that he called the policeman to help him because and the policeman starts to get it, you know.
Oh, it's very hard.
Що це таке? Вона якісь речі.
Let's write some information from us, from the project, and then add some comment on the placement.
It's important, of course, like how they comment that situation.
And then, yeah, they were thinking to write similar cases happened in, for example, Odessa and I don't know. But yes, yes, like the statistics
Інші. Прямо. Ми ще не близько. Ми сиділи young families, children, окей.
Я можу сказати, що там було представлено, які була, а тоді починаємо. Отримане, різні думки, презентували, примущали відвідувачів.
Роман, а можна підійти до проєкту?
О, пані,
А можна? Да. А можна на Фейсбук кинути матеріал, щоб ви їх показали, або якось інакше? Або на пошту? Просто ж, або я можу свій підійти.
Так і віддай свій комп'ютер, так
Добре.
буде найкраще.
Вот. Більшість з них були молоді сім'ї з дітьми, смаколики в студентах, локальних То, що ти хочеш зробити експерт, це
записалися сюди, це типа, що сталося, те, що вони збудували звинували. Ми їх записували. А ми записували те,
It's like subtopic.
Ну, ми
And then then we have
A group of radical vegans, a group
like
of
the what?
Да.
Yes.
А ти
So,
що вони
Ну, это все поменяло.
How to be nice.
ні, що типа
How to
ти можеш сказати все, що like
now the members of Kiev police department join this joining
What caused
radical group to Islamic. Like
the fact of
None of the members of the police
А що? Я пишу, що?
department took part, haven't,
I don't know.
Поранили 3 людей, нанесли шкоди. Потім виявилося, що це військовий кейс.
Томас чи?
Зараз поранили.
violence, haven't acted
Made damage.
in violent
That was taken by
hadn't taken
Made huge damage. Нам ж треба емоційну мову. Добре, у нас що таке
violence
like this.
нам треба просто made huge damage. Low intense. Можеш сказати мені українською? Не
Actually, that's more.
Можеш свій підійняти, тому що в мене
set
повністю діти. Чекай, як тобі останній не скажу.
set Valentina
А, ні, я тобі останній скажу. Зараз буде потрібно.
made by.
Я видав, це потрібно. Просто поставити.
Що ти хочеш сказати?
Фото покажу.
власники сімейного бізнесу, які ніби представляли
Понял, що я?
Юра вже все розказав.
Нічого не
Local
розказали.
businessman keep on Юра.
Там всі просто походили, зрозуміли? Окей.
What else?
Which belongs.
Ти, Юр, ти тільки спробуй спочатку відкрити так, як в порядку.
Добре.
Owner.
Добре, я бажаю.
Ні, там нормально. Ми продумали.
Some background.
Okay. They had
Юр, це набагато простіше, можна зі сторінки показувати.
Це по порядку, якщо не
Да.
Mention
Юр,
that
я можу
maybe
зі
like
свого
2
боку
weeks
показати, але
ago
якщо...
someone was doing
Я понял.
some-
3, 2, 1.
Ні, я не можу.
Отак.
Так.
There are several cases
Я забув.
in various Ukrainian cities.
There is,
Ні, чекай,
it's not good.
Останній
There-
день.
there-
Тут можна написати, що є
Це вже потім
Ти не можеш сховати?
Ти балансуєш. Але потім ще фотки ви теж скажіть? Зробили?
мова арт.
Там не ніякого програмування, це просто пару кліків.
Я думаю, що коли ти зачитаєш хоча б першу фразу, буде ефектніше.
Коротше, двоє чоловіків хочуть шлюб у УПЦ. Єпископ Епіфанік прийняв на особисту аудієнцію односадеву пару. Через місяць після надання Томасу в Україні в одній з львівських церков ПЦУ двоє чоловіків висловили бажання офіційно зареєструвати свої стосунки. І, власне, весь матеріал... Дискримінація західнець.
Все, шукайте роботу.
Таким чином, редакції навіть вдалося отримати слова і коментарі від власне єпископа Єпіфанія. Він каже, що кожен у цьому світі має право висловлювати свою думку, попри те, що я вважаю гомосексуалізм неприроднім явищем, все ж... Я не... Де?
Ну це ж єпископ.
Це ж єпископ, так. Все ж ми не можемо заперечувати те, що воно існує поряд з нами, і ми не можемо ігнорувати чи дискримінувати таких пар. Власне, як на мене, чудова новина, виглядає дуже класно. Навіть і фотка.
Це реально все?
Це абсолютно реально.
Ну, тобто його орієнтація
Да.
Він справді був помічником Леми?
Да. Так, і ще от. Ну там можна просто, щоб якщо хтось хоче почитати, може почитати, в принципі.
Тільки не обмовлюсь сторінку.
Так, головне не обмовляти сторінку.
Все розсипеться.
Ось якщо ти скинеш нам лінк,
Це
то ми
ви-
будемо це бачити.
Ні,
Ні, ну це якщо...
я ж не змінюю сам сайт.
Так, я
Можна редагувати текст.
Ну тільки все напишіть.
А якщо зробити сторінку?
Ні, зараз.
Там ще є.
Власне, ще одна маленька новина.
Я далі редагував, бо зависла сторінка, і я не хотів, щоб це пропалося. Але воно дуже реально. Люди, які навіть навколо історичні всякі совочки, то в принципі, могли до того вилізти, чуваки.
Дякую за увагу.
Very good, very good. Okay, so, yeah? Alright, so what do you think, guys? Is it, yeah, effective? Awesome, yeah? What makes it work?
Using of real text, as I understood.
Yeah.
And the style of it.
Yeah. Also quite a lot of true information, yeah? So like a real person.
There was a lot of true information.
Not all was real. All words was real.
And like the news about like the UPA and so on was at least the article about the PPM vice president said that there are going to be no UPA monuments. It was a real news. And so it's not far away from.
That's a cool tool actually. So what do you have to press once again?
On Windows it's called
Blackboard.
It's not Windows, it's mouse in the browser. You can open the code of your website and you can change the code. And we can change the code for the website. But we can change viewing on our laptops and our
So what were the elements of deep stories here?
So something they were based on real issues in Ukraine and Poland in those cases. For example, we have an issue of perceptive LGBT community in Ukraine, and it's a hard question especially for religious communities. And in the case of UPA, we have a very conservative nationalistic government in Poland. not far away from the real deal.
So if we try to sort of map the topical relationship of these texts, or some kind of intertextual relationship, yeah? So what other issues are called up in your texts? So, for example, in the first one.
Can you repeat the question?
If we talk about connection to other texts, right, and other issues, right? So, what issues are framed together in your text? So, what other issues are pulled up? So, how do you build like this intertextual network? So, okay, as the real person, that's fine. Yeah, that's really good. Then, Thomas, for example, right? So you just it's a different topic, yeah.
Also, we use
hold it up.
absolutely real situation. We just change a country, and we add about Thomas and add about every time. That's all.
And what elements of traditional journalist text have you used?
Yeah, few links, 2 points of view, 2 comments.
Yeah, and then also like statistics, right? Background. So like a classical structure. You also use inverted pyramid, I think. Okay. That's fine. All right. Time is up. Well, thanks. We have already heard one failure story. Does any other group want to present?
We would like to present, but we don't have it ready like written.
Yeah.
Okay. How much time do you need?
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
I guess.
Oh,
I
okay.
can present, but we haven't. We can read the.
Yeah. Just read it. Yeah. Okay. So just speak up loudly.
Я не знаю, як це типу ти розумієш, хто дає.
I'm sorry.
It's can it? Or shall we maybe take just 7 minutes and just relax and
Okay.
chill? Yeah. So you just take a break, guys.
Can I answer for one my question?
Yes.
I have one question. If it's like a feature of fake news that some revolutionary like event public on one site on one SME, no, can it be feature of fake news? So often it can be true news, but public only on one BBC, I think, or somewhere else.
So it's like true,
Yeah.
but
No, if it's a feature of ознака фейкової історії, якщо воно тільки на одному сайті опубліковано. Тобто щось революційне, от як, наприклад, про тих чоловіків. І якщо воно публікується тільки, наприклад, на Західнет, чи це ознака фейкової новини?
Ні, це не ознака фейкової новини. Це просто, мені цікаво, щоб ми зараз відпрацювали внутрішню структуру фейкової новини, так? Тобто не оцей от контекст весь зовнішній, так? Те, що використовується при факт-чекінгу, тобто коли перевіряється джерело саме, так? Коли перевіряється, власне кажучи, на основі інших текстів, так? Перевіряється на основі якоїсь офіційної інформації і так далі. А просто коли от сам текст сам по собі абсолютно от ізольований від цього контексту, так? Тобто тут ми не розглядаємо взагалі, де опубліковано. Вам не треба зараз вказувати джерело, де це опубліковано. Це хлопці так зробили, це дуже добре, але це не обов'язково.
Я просто для себе думаю, чи, наприклад, якщо 5 сайтів публікує фейкові новини, і це реально фейк, а один публікує правду, ні,
звісно, можна собі таке уявити запросто. Так. Це абсолютно не ознака, це немає.
We can have more information. It's kind of very sensitive topic.
to take a lot of comments from them. We can
Я загнав. Чисто саморозуміння. Дуже кожен не можна серце.
doesn't work like this in music. It's a new structure. If you're writing analytical thing, you can write context. You can write context after because we're using the parameter.
I mean, two sentences of
It can be
Ну, ми
after.
можемо в його
Maybe
цитату
after
вписати, що
before
супер
background.
найс і
We
пояснити,
can
що
explain
саме це
what is
Можна
right.
нагадати контекст.
It will be nice.
Саме він
Okay, let's try like keep right is the
чекає за 5 років.
To read this article like operation labels, then we will have to add it to set line to the telephone or something like that. Not just because official statement from the speaker or the
They go to state inform press center.
yes.
They do that immediately. So I think it doesn't have to be like yeah. It always happens like this because we have wide all the time. What is
So I decided to try it.
Можемо це все було сало в шоколаді.
Okay, it's
Да, камон, чекай.
Добре, і в кінці вже коли ми в кінці ми можемо тільки штуки, щоб
all the insurance
Similar
like secure, protected in
So it was put into
transported.
I don't know, Kiev, National Hospital, or you know the name, maybe. No. Nearest hospital.
Nearest hospital.
По ідеї все. I guess we're ready.
It starts with a V.
Okay,
They
excellent,
state
excellent.
that
But do you guys, the other group, would like to begin? Because
Yes.
you were going to start. Okay, yeah.
Теж коментарі, все.
Okay, don't rush, just read it out loud and slowly.
Okay, we have kind of breaking news that happened today.
Yes.
So this is it. Policemen joined a group of radicals during the Kyiv Pride. 6 participants of the Kyiv Pride were injured by a group of radicals near the Shevchenko Park. Local policemen joined the incident. According to witnesses, none of them tried to stop the conflict. Ostap, the participant of the Pride, told to reporters of mediaq.ua, I was there with my boyfriend when radicals started to attack us with their fists. My boyfriend was beaten by a policeman who I called for a help. Imagine. Press department denies the charge of the participants. None of the members of the police department hadn't taken part in, I don't know if it's good grammar, in such violent accident, said Valentina Kuzmenko, the speaker of Kyiv police. All the injured participants are transported to the nearest hospital. There are 4 violent cases in other cities that happened during the last demonstrations. Read more in our previous articles. Here you can get some links from Beam Harkin and so on.
Okay, okay. So, what do you think, guys? Is it an effective fake news story? Oh, yeah, the time is really up now. Yeah, please, anybody.
We?
No, just
All of
anyone,
us.
all of us. Yeah.
I think we created this like not like offline, so it was harder to create something from completely like no background, just to improvise things.
Yeah.
So it's a harder way than to like to make a comparison to some other cases that are similar in other countries, like they have the Poland case, I think.
Yeah.
So it's not as easy as.
Yeah. Well,
but
writing fake news is not easy, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's very effective from perspective of foreigner or foreign journalist.
Mm-hmm.
Because in many eyes of foreign journalists, Ukraine is xenophobic and so on. So
Mhm.
it's very natural to
So it
story.
taps into a deep story, actually, a narrative of Ukraine as a backward, kind of xenophobic country.
Yes,
Right.
so the category is definitely working. I think maybe it's the narrative problem, but it was difficult to catch all the facts while just listening.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we
Yeah,
do not usually perceive the news.
Yeah,
like,
right, right.
But the categories, I think they can actually work. Like Ukraine is a xenophobic, like homophobic, and so on, like background society.
And from professional point, we keep the structure of the real news
Mhm.
publishment. Publication.
Publication.
Publication. Yeah, thank you. So it was. It seems like real.
Yeah, and
all the. Yeah.
no, go ahead.
No, it seems like real from all the sides.
Yeah, and the key element. What is the key kind of the heart of the story?
Emotions.
Yeah, but no, like just in terms of narim, right? Like a narrative, the key narrative element. What is the main, the crux of the story? The policeman joined the radicals. Yeah, yeah. How do you feel about that? Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
usual.
It's yes.
yeah. Trustworthy. Yeah. But it's kind of, but also kind of, it's absurd enough, kind of in a way, right? It's not something that you expect, and kind of works really persuasive in that sense. So like it's the more absurd it is, the more believable in some way. You know, it's like, yeah, it's like when they say when a dog has bitten a man, you know, it's not it's not news, you know, but when it's otherwise, you know, it's kind of, that is news. So there is this kind of element, like, wow, what is this, like, you know? And we actually like witness lots of these kind of news, you know, like on the media. So yeah, okay, good, all right. And the third story, yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of difficult to navigate. I will just try to navigate you through this structure so you can catch it. Like, so the headline is: Traditional family festival was ruined by the group of radical vegans. The lead, like
Radical
vegans.
Vegans.
Yeah.
Okay.
Traditional family festival was ruined by the group of radical vegans. So the excerpt, like the lead, is: the group of aggressive young people harmed several attendants and done huge damage. And then the article starts like: this year's season opening barbecue event took place in Brjuhovići Forest and attracted 700 attendants. Most of them were young families with children buying some goodies at local store stands. Besides that, there was a tent which belonged to local vegano huligano owners with a "meat is murder" sign on it. The festival administration kindly asked them to put the sign away as it conflicted with the main concept of the festival. Vegans rejected the request, so the administration asked them to leave the location. This provoked aggression on their behalf, so the vegans started to ruin the tents, grills, and throwing food on the ground. These actions have forced the security to call the police. Policemen recorded 3 injured civilians and estimated damage of 25,000 hryvnias equivalent. There is one more story behind that. Amongst vegan activists there was a 15-year-old boy, a son of Vegano Huligano owners, Julian Salo. He was forced to live meatless life because of his parents' views. Here's a quote from him.
My parents were concealing the meaning of my surname for 15 years. You can imagine my astonishment when I saw a tent with my surname on it. People around there were super nice and explained me that salo was our national dish, so I decided to try it. By the time I took the first bite of salo, the fight started. A few minutes after that, I saw a policeman handcuffing my parents.
We cannot even imagine how many similar cases there are in Ukraine. Experts say that veganism is a main threat for Ukrainian identity. Yes.
Okay. Good job. Okay. So, is it an effective fake news story?
It's definitely an emotional one, and we try to keep this group identity thing. Like we've divided society with vegans and those who care about Ukraine.
Yeah.
So we've tried to frame it that way. Maybe there are some questions about the structure, but we think that it could work at some local levels, like not national.
It would have a lot of response on Facebook.
Okay. What about the other groups? How do you find it? Is it believable?
No.
I mean, like, if we'll see it on Michael's show, I will believe.
Yeah. So it's more of a satire story.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. So it's kind of it's a good fake news story, but it hints to its own fakeness, right? So it's like, especially I think like Julian Salo, it is a little bit too much, like a bit of a stretch, you know. So I can hardly believe that the owner of Vegano Huligano is a surname Salo, and the song I don't know. It's like so yeah, you kind of stretch it a little bit, but it was definitely fun. So definitely scored high on the pleasure, I think. So you really nice positive reaction. So it's definitely a very good example of a satirical fake news story. But are there perhaps people who are likely to believe this, at least, to take it at face value? What kind of people do you think would believe this story?
My mom.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, so
All parents
older
were
people.
against the vegetarian thing.
Yeah, was
Yes,
more
one more example.
traditional conservative, right? Yeah.
To be honest, the idea is like not new at all, because there was a series of TSN like videos that were just focused on vegan radicals, and they're like depicted the cases where when people ruined someone's clothes if it was made from fur, and so on. Yeah, and so on and so on. So basically, I guess the older generation would definitely get it, and maybe people from rural areas would also. They are not used. They have not that level of irony and skepticism to the news they read. So an emotional piece like that would definitely work, I guess.
And what about the other stories? So what kind of?
To add that like old people maybe not good oriented in this world of vegan huligana and I'm not sure that it's the target is old people.
Define old people.
Yeah.
Define old people. How old they should be. They're not
Like over 30, over 40.
Over 30.
35.
Over 67, I guess.
That's quite precise. You know.
Over, I would say over 50 maybe, like over like 45 plus. But it depends, kind of. There are really like kind of generational differences. So like the generation of my parents, like they are like in their 50s but closer to 60s actually, or 60, around 60. So yeah, they could buy it. But then there is also this younger generation, people who were born in the 70s, who are now like in their 40s and around 50s. You know, they also have kind of a bit different, you know, mindset. And it's difficult to kind of pinpoint what exactly is it. But they're different, but they also have their kind of the other kind of fake news stories they like to believe they have. And there is empirical research actually from the US which shows that older people are actually worse at media literacy than young people. So people who are aged like 20 to 30 are actually much better at guessing, you know, right, the fake news stories compared to people who are over 50. So that's it's a verified empirical finding from the US, but I think it could be extrapolated to.
I think in Ukraine is absolutely the same. You just need to use like media, like television, and well, it's not fake anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But what about the other made-up stories we have? So other perhaps some other groups of people apart from the old people who are likely to believe them. For example, your story about the policeman.
Teenagers, definitely.
Teenagers.
A year ago, I was passing by River Square, and there was a march of the nationalists. Most of them were kids, like 15 years old, hanging torches in their hands, and they were like 10th grade or something. So like most of them. Yeah, okay, but like the core were like adults, 25, 20 till 30, and maybe veterans and so on. But most of the population were teenagers. So they are very affected by like romanticism and so on. And nationalist narrative.
Pretty much anti-police.
Yeah. I actually agree with Yura, but I would extend this like time gap and also include students, because there are a lot of my peers that have a really skeptical thoughts on our police and all of these structures. That's why this story is actually believable for them, like for policemen not being as a police should be. So actually, I think that even I would believe that kind of story if I have read it in like a from credible source.
Yeah. And the first one, your story
about gay marriage.
Yeah. So who do you think would be likely to believe it? What would be the target audience?
For example, our classroom. For example, our generation, because we are, most of us, I believe we are progressive in our views. But they're like, finally, yes.
Okay, so
it's like in that.
But that here the source, of course, comes in, and it's like let's maybe wait a little bit with that, because I mean, of course, it is a traditional practice of fact checkers to look at the source, right? It's one of the tools we use to verify a story. But I mean, if we just look at the text alone, without any context whatsoever.
I suppose if my grandma, for example, read something like this, she would definitely vote against Poroshenko and against Thomas. And she would call her friends and tell about it right away.
Yeah.
Because this is something that the really religious people cannot believe. But the Ukrainian church can do something like this. The older generation is really...
So actually, what we see is that fake news are most often, and they are actually best tailored for different audiences, right? So it is quite hard to come up with a let's get on. No, share a joke. Show everyone. Oh, you have something. Okay.
It sounds like
alcoholic.
Yeah.
Is Is it
No,
some
it's just
alcohol?
No, it's juice. It's really
Well,
juice.
it's medokah maybe. Color like that.
Students are boring these days. You know? When I was a student, I mean, we were drinking beer and cheap wine, cheap port wine. Seminars, no, seriously. Well, yeah, okay, so yeah, it is really hard to. It's possible, of course, to deceive everyone, right? But it's kind of hard to write a fake news story that would appeal to everyone, right? So, and what we see most often is that they are targeted at specific audiences, and those websites, they sometimes specialize quite narrowly, right? So, for example, in the US, like there are lots of these like alt-right websites and blogs and so on. But there are also some like progressive, like pro-democratic blogs, mostly that produce also like fake news, but with a more democratic agenda, and that is kind of I think that's one of the main trends, I think, in this, that they are so partisan, right? They are capitalizing on these political rifts, right? So there is a really close relation to these rifts. They are built on these fault lines in the society. So which reminds basically of this group in identification thing, right? So that's one of the most indispensable things here. Yes, I don't know. Yeah.
No,
It's fine.
I wanted to ask also about behind the fake news, we have also the problem with the headlines. It's a great problem because you read the headline, it appeals to you, and then you read the text, and most of the information just doesn't match the
so
text.
clickbait.
Yeah.
Clickbait, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there is actually a study which says that actually most of the people, like maybe 80% or something, they never actually click on these fake news stories. They never read them. They just read headlines. And sometimes they just share after just reading headline.
Whoa.
Yeah. This is big, right? So it's kind of, it's good that, in the beginning of the lecture, you guessed it right, based just on the headlines. In that case, that works fine, right? But sometimes it's just enough to come up with a, polarizing, and fun, absurd headline, to make it spread,
I have a question. It's a little bit off the topic, but so a couple of months ago I did an experiment with myself, with the media I read, and like I decided to clean all of the subscriptions I have and like subscribe only
media
media subscriptions and like subscribe only to those sources who provide the nice form of content. Like I'm not looking on what they're saying, but I'm looking on how they're saying. Like the the information-based, the facts, maybe infographics, like those things. And like in couple of months, in 2 or 3 months, I've realized that all of my media are like left-wing media. And I've tried like to balance it a little bit, and I've found like some right-wing media like PragerU and so on. They're American, but they're like more to right-wing, and I've noticed that their content form is just awful. I cannot perceive content in that way because there is lack of facts, it's counterintuitive, and so on. Do you have some comments on that? Like why right-wingers suck at journalism and infographics and so on. Why left-wingers are like much better in that?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a left-winger thing. I would say it might be a more generic, like liberal. Thing. Because, there are also, Huffington Post, for example. I'm not really into it because I think they are also they are using virality too much, you know, and their headlines are also quite terrible. Like, you know, I don't know, a stupid dude tried to body shame, you know, a girl on Facebook, and look how she shut him up, you know. You won't believe what happened, you know. Something like this. I mean, it's also quite just totally trying to force, you know, this kind of viral content. But I mean, it's more a mainstream thing, like mainstream media, like New York Times, you know. But it's not very left. I would say it's like liberal, maybe left liberal, yeah, but not like really left. So it's just that I think they are operating within this. Journalist modernism framework, yeah, this traditional paradigm, and the right-wing sources. I mean, you can, apart from the fake news websites, right? We can, of course, remember some kind of legitimate sources, sort of like Fox News or something, right? But they are indeed, they are more sensationalistic, they are more emotional, kind of more tabloid-like, right? So it's interesting that they are appealing to emotions, and the mainstream media are trying to appeal to the facts and kind of evidence, right? So yeah, that's an interesting thing, but I think it also has to do with the core audience also, that conservatives are probably somehow, like the conservative agenda is probably, it works much more at the emotional level somehow. Even though, I mean, like left agenda also is quite, actually quite emotional. I mean, like things like justice and so on. I mean, you can argue like with facts and statistics and so on that it is actually good to have an equal society and so on. But when it comes to politics, like it's all about emotions. So there is actually this very interesting theory by Chantal Mouffe, a Belgian political thinker. Have you heard about her? So she says that actually we should not underestimate emotions and the role of emotions in politics. And she actually criticizes mainstream politicians for sort of over-relying on facts and evidence, and sort of trying to exclude the emotions. And then the conservatives just, you know, seize this opportunity. Whatever the liberals abandoned, you know, was seized by the conservatives, who just saw an opportunity here. So she's, and she also criticizes sort of the self-righteousness of mainstream liberal politicians, who just they always tend to frame the political struggle as the fight between good and evil. Which sort of actually weakens their position, because if you, rather than presenting the political struggle as a struggle between different political alternatives, if it is a fight between good and evil, you know, you are sort of excluding the the opponent. So it's not about becoming rather than becoming agonistic, as she says, right? So which is basically competitive, right? It becomes antagonistic. So it's kind of throws in conflict, right? And this is what conservatives then capitalize on. So emotions that liberals sort of threw away, and then this kind of good versus evil kind of thing, which they also use, like, look, that's how they see us, you know. So, yeah.
Can you repeat the title and the author?
Chantal Mouffe. I'll write down her name. And the title is like, she has written many articles and books about it. Is it clear? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, all right. Based on this experience, right, of discussing fake news and actually writing fake news, trying to see how the narrative works here. So, what do you think are the implications for fact-checking here?
Source.
Yes, but that's in these. I mean, well, okay, you have a source, right, in your text. But if we just exclude the source from the equation, right? If we just rely on the text itself, the way it is written, so we just see this, somewhere, and let's just leave the source aside for a while. So, what are the implications for the fact-checking work in terms of the structure of the text and all these stylistic, rhetorical devices we're using, the story elements, all these naremes and deep stories we are using? So, can we, as fact-checkers, rely on the structure of the text to add this component to fact-checking work, apart from the source and official information and verifying with other texts and so on? Yeah.
So the first thing is like emotional language. We all of our teams used it in order to manipulate the audience. So I think that would be like the first call that maybe the news may be fake. And also credible media, they usually depict like both sides. If there is a conflict or something like that, there will be two opinions depicted. And in all of our cases, it was like only the one radical, like definite, the right thing. So I think that would be also a second call. But if we're talking about the structure, I think your example showed us that we cannot fully rely on that, because fake news can be written even more professional than the real ones.
Yeah.
So basically, on the previous semester, we had to check the same event in different media, and so we've chosen like Ukrainian, Russian, and the foreign ones, and we've noticed that Ukrainian and Russian, they basically are mostly one-sided in depicting the event, while media like New York Times or something like that, they're trying to show much more broad picture of the situation. Like they're showing different points of view. So for me, it's also a call for fake news, like one-sidedness of theirs.
Are you talking about the theory of framing?
Yeah.
I think what about fake news, fake articles? We can discover it when there are a lot of fake news are exclusive. For example, like a very famous journalist Stephen Glass wrote about exclusive news, exclusive articles, but all of from this was fake, false. It's I mean that fake news, it's often exclusive news. Like something's sensation, something's very effective, because journalists must give readers, audience more strange news, more strange facts, and exclusive and effective in this news. It can be fake.
Right.
Yeah, another insight. Taras reminded me about our test last term, and I believe that we have comparison like post-Soviet journalist style and Western style of writing articles and opinions, and I believe that there are two like modernist type of thinking. Then you can affect the world and somehow through text and so on, but it's not all the same for all the media in the West. But definitely, if we find something about transgenders, some some of the media, I don't know, Gerald or Guardian will be on the only one side of the issue. So it depends really. And perhaps we considered the political issues. They were just informative, and Russian and Ukrainian were subjective. So it's really hard.
Yeah. Thank you. And then maybe going back to what we talked about yesterday and thinking about the novel digital methods to work with. Do you see any potential here for developing certain algorithmic tools for fact-checking that could work actually without, or in any case, without much human control?
There are some ways, I guess, but it would be really easy for fake news media to adapt to those changes. Like, for example, if we use like the emotional language rate, because there are measures of, in English at least, like which words are emotional, which words are like strong words, and so on and so on. So if we make artificial intelligence find those emotional words, in that case, I guess fake media would just use less emotional language. Maybe it would be less effective then, but it would be able for them to get disguised again.
Okay.
So I don't see like the direct solution for that.
I believe that there should be no constraints and some like restrict rules for what you can write and what you do, like hate speech or swear words are for example intolerable, but let people give people a chance to analyze the text and so on. So it's not very liberal. It's kind of fascist to somehow to eliminate everything that's, well, who decides that? So then the government, then it's answered to the one person who decides that this type of media is not okay for a country or something. So it's not.
So what about like journalists, for example, who had traditionally had the monopoly of deciding what is true and what is false? What if they kind of insist on keeping this realm for the future as well?
Interesting question. I don't know. Answer right away.
Okay, anybody else?
The question is
whether we can use some of this experience that we, for example, had today, looking at fake news as narratives. So looking at stylistic devices, rhetorical devices, narrative building blocks, right, to develop fact-checking tools that could work basically independently of human agencies, like artificial intelligence fact-checking tools. They are being developed actually. Facebook has already developed it. Of course, keeps it under wraps, but also other but please.
I think it's impossible without a real human, because machine is not, machine doesn't have that intuition kind of, and machine doesn't have that background and experience. And I don't believe that the algorithm can achieve fact-checking success.
Can the machine learn from humans?
Of course can, but I'm not very optimistic.
Yeah, okay.
I hope.
Yeah.
So there are two things I want to say. That, for example, Facebook and Google now want to biased question because there are going to be a lot of people whose texts want to appear in Facebook, but Google or Facebook won't use it for their good because it's most of the texts are without authorship, and I believe that it's very easy to know, for example, if you're an author and you write usually consistently, so your style of text doesn't use of words, certain language doesn't change drastically through, I don't know, a month. And so it's very easy to learn, I don't know, some neural net to identify who's writing and when it's writing. It's won't be complicated.
Well, there are reports already of neural network that is actually better at identifying fake news than humans. I mean, but it learned from humans, but it eventually became better. But I mean, yeah, there is an article I think on archive preprint database. So yeah, we need to see more of that, of course, before we can be sure. But yeah, it's like it's a developing story, let's say. All right, and the last question. So, what do you guys think would be the best, the most effective response to the fake news epidemic?
Here in Ukraine, we have some agencies or journalists that analyze Russia's fake news and busted the Stop Fake movement. And I think that at this point, this is the most effective response, just to fuel the media sphere with alternative things and usually using the same keywords and so on and so on. So when a person is googling a particular question, a particular situation, a person would be able to have again two alternative points of view. So I think that Stop Fake movement and publishing it would be the most effective at this case.
I agree that maybe it's more influencer, that there are media which make and fulfill only with this case, check information, yes, like Stop Fake and so on. They do only this, yes, from different media sites of Ukraine and abroad too. Because they have one direction and they use different tools, stuff for improving their skills, so on. And of course, everybody of us, of journalists and just citizens of Ukraine, can add their work about fake. When you check in your Facebook lines something that can be right, you can say to journalists from Stop Fake and add your article. For example, it's like citizen journalist journalism, like close to this.
All right, anyone else?
I think the question is not how we perceive those news. It's more concerned how the older generation, our parents even, how to make them stop sharing it. Because it's something impossible. I don't know. I have a lot of, on my Facebook friends list, I have a lot of teachers from my previous school, and they are sharing fake news and they actually believe it, and it's a problem in Ukraine. It's really a problem, despite the sites Stop Fake and etc. I don't know.
Ban old people from Facebook.
And they are getting the most of information actually from Facebook, from social media.
Yeah. That's true. That has become the major news consumption platform source. Yeah.
So I have a very simple ideas. For example, very first one, I believe in education, and for example, if you introduce school of media literacy or combined with a critical thinking course in high school or first courses of universities everywhere, for medical students especially, for medical students, And but on the state level, it can be some legislative punishments for the media itself. It's not for the person. If you hire a person who writes fake news, then you have a punishment and you lose the, for example, legitimacy.
All right. So fact checking, regulation, right? Media literacy, right? Yeah. What else?
I have one idea.
Okay.
It's to me, like, what can I do, personally me, not only but me. We can monitoring this mass media which writing fake news, and then go work there and to write fake news so boring, so long and so not interesting, and then people start to read it, and then everything will be perfect. But we have to
so destroy the system from the inside.
Yeah. That's an interesting way, definitely, like subvert the business.
After the first week of work.
Right.
And I thought that I would withdraw my idea of education because, for example, we have political literacy, and that's average in every country. So about around 60% in every country, whether it's Ukraine or Germany. So most of the population are politically and therefore media literate.
Illiterate.
Yeah. So maybe through the education, maybe like some new reforms.
Yeah.
Maybe it would help.
I agree with Yura because once I was in the one event and the speaker said that the biggest problem is that in media sphere in Ukraine that we don't have really good political system. We don't know who is left wing, who is right wing.
Yeah.
We need to.
Essentially, it's a populist media,
Yeah.
political
Yeah.
field. Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, so all of this sounds really, really promising, of course, but on the other hand, I have actually heard reports. I think it's still kind of maybe not, this initiative is not active, so to say, so it's being developed, but I've heard, and we'll see whether this will be confirmed, so it might be fake news about fake news, but that actually Russia is working on developing fake fact checkers. Right, so all these tools can actually be, so one thing I would like alert all of you to is that all these tools can also be used to subvert the situation further. And there are actually already, there are fake fact checkers.
Like double fake.
Yes. It's a bit like meta fake.
Meta fake.
Totally. It's like super postmodernist, crazy stuff, but that's the reality we live in. It's like totally Matrix. I don't know. And there are actually already fake fact checkers. So, for example, in Sweden, there was, during the election campaign, there was a true fact checker, which was called Faktist.se. And that was a real initiative, like all the major Swedish newspapers collaborated, and their journalists, they fact-checked all the political statements by candidates and so on, and all kind of dubious news and so on, right? But then there appeared also a website which was called Faktist.eu. And that was a fake fact checker, which was also like fact checking the true fact checkers and kind of exposing, their lies and so on. And I've heard from Russians actually, from Russian journalists who are actually active, like kind of very close to the, I think, a public chamber on media or something like this of the Russian Duma. And they are working actively to develop these fake fact checkers. So the second act of this story is ahead of us. So yeah.
So we have our super villains.
Yes. Yeah. So
let's think about how we deal with that. Yeah, but we will leave that beyond the classroom. All right. Thanks for today. Thank you so much. Okay, any further questions? Anything? You can always, please feel free to contact me anytime. You can always get my contacts, I think, from Veronica or Ghana or anyone at the department. So I will send my PowerPoints to Veronica and she will pass it on to you. Otherwise, and what I also, I think I promised to send you some literature. Like Darnton was that the historical work. Okay, it's actually it's an article. It's a kind of media article. You know, it's on New York Times review of books. But it's short but really important. All right, I'll do that. Thanks for today. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it and I learned a lot from you.
Yeah.